going to be discussing, mainly tomorrow, the cardiovascular system, but I want to kind of give an overview of the cardiovascular system, talk about some brief presentations you'll be doing on that as well, and yeah, and that's it. We'll have all day tomorrow to kind of look at that, and I think you just have a quiz tonight, so it will not be as overwhelming a night as it has been, as last night was. But let's talk about the cardiovascular system and why it's so important. Mr. Thornton, I don't remember which point it was, maybe point number 6 or 7, but he said it best: the hardest working muscle in your body is your heart. It's your cardiac muscle. In this class, we mainly study skeletal muscle because we care about your posture and movement. But the heart is a muscle that actually it keeps beating until the day you die, right? And that's amazing. If you guys hold up your fist right now, this is about the size of your heart. Now, that is very surprising when you think about what it does, because the main artery that comes out of your heart is about the size of a garden hose. So this tiny thing is able to pump this tremendous volume out of it, this tremendous amount of blood out of it, and it has to because you have hundreds of miles of tubing in your body. You're like, what? Hundreds of miles of tubing in my body? Yes. Very tiny tubing, by the way, because as this big trunk comes off, it splits into smaller trunks and smaller trunks and smaller trunks, right? Kind of like your nervous system, and it goes throughout your entire body. But it has to pump through those things. Just like, I don't know if you've ever been at the restaurant, you're bored, and you stick 6 straws together, and you try to suck the soda through the 6 straws, and it's fairly hard. Well, imagine like 60 miles of those straws, right? That would be challenging, but your heart does this all the time. It pumps all the time. Also, take your hand right now, and while I'm talking, just start doing this. And now do that for 50 to 100 years without stopping. I think that you will find it gets difficult after about 50 to 100 seconds, maybe 50 to 100 minutes, let alone 50 to 100 weeks, months, years. This is amazing. And by the way, with all due respect, not like you're doing it, Miss Hendrickson, your heart is pumping much harder, right? So I'm not trying to make fun of you, but it's not just sitting there going, it's ka-dunk, 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 right? It's really working. And when you're exercising, it could be in a top athlete pumping as much as 200 beats per minute. That's really fast. When you're at complete rest, maybe 60 beats a minute. That's still really fast. That's a beat every second. And without it, we would die. And here's why. Your heart is the transportation, the material transportation system for your body. Your heart, your arteries, and your veins. And very simply put, arteries are tubes going away from the heart. And when I say tubes, please truly think of plumbing. We really do mean tubes. So, and veins are plumbing coming back to the heart. And so in general, there is an exception to this I'll explain in a minute, but in general, arteries are carrying oxygenated, food-rich, oxygen-rich blood away from the heart to your body, mainly oxygen-rich, to your body, to your cells, and veins are bringing back oxygen-depleted, carbon dioxide-rich stuff back to your heart, for the purpose of eventually carrying this to the lungs. And we haven't done the lungs yet. Actually, Miss Bauer is going to tell you about the lungs because there's a day that I'm on the Arizona Board of Massage Therapy now that we have a board meeting, so she will do one lecture for you, and that's on the lungs. But the fact is, the heart brings this blood to the lungs, and at the lungs, your CO2 goes out, and new oxygen comes in, and your heart takes that oxygen and pumps it back to your cells again. 2 things are very important about this. Your cells need oxygen to do the chemical reactions they have to actually make energy. Just like an engine in a car needs oxygen to burn the gasoline, fairly similarly, you need oxygen to convert certain chemical reactions and make energy in your body. You need oxygen for your cells to make energy. You need it to run your engines. You can run temporarily without oxygen, but not very long. Miss Everson?
Just curious if there's like a presentation of such a...
Not yet. Thank you. But you're right. Sometimes I forget to put up the presentation, but not yet. Oxygen is one thing that you need for your cells to produce energy. But there is another thing that the heart is doing for you. CO2 is poisonous to your body. It will kill you. When you guys hold your breath, you think that what you're feeling is, I need oxygen. But what your brain is feeling is, I'm dying of CO2 and I've got to get rid of it. So your heart is removing the poisonous CO2 from your body because it is a waste product, right? And I know this sounds like a weird example, but for the same reason you wouldn't swim in your own pee or whatever, because it's a waste product, you need to get it out of there. Your CO2 is kind of like that. Your cells can't keep swimming in it. It's got to get out of your body. So you are actually doing this again for your cells, right? Ms. Hendrickson, please.
I think I read somewhere that the air we breathe has a high percentage of nitrogen in it, actually, yes. Like just the general air.
Yes.
Does that build up in our cells, and is it... Like,
no.
Is
Nitrogen seems to be a fairly inert gas to plants and animals on this planet. I don't know what it does in other places, but here it seems to be fairly inert. You're right. It's just coming along for the ride. Yeah.
Except for when you go scuba diving.
Well,
if you come up too fast.
You get the bends, yes. You get like build up of certain things. Yes, you're absolutely right. But in and of itself, it's not a problem. So the other unusual thing, by the way, that has nothing to do with the circulatory system, but I just find very fascinating, is we all need oxygen and we all need to get rid of CO2. Plants all need CO2 and need to get rid of oxygen. This is why it's great to have plants in your house. This is why we don't want to burn down the rainforests and in the world and such, because they are actually producing the very oxygen that we breathe. So anyway, your heart is responsible, 100% responsible for getting oxygen to all of your cells so that they can actually produce the functions they need to make the energy they need to stay alive. When you cut off blood to a group of cells, they die. Put a rubber band around the tip of your finger really tightly and leave it on there for a couple days and we will amputate the tip of your finger. It has to get blood to it. It will die. And it has to get rid of CO2. It has to. But the other thing that your heart does is it also, we just talked about the digestive system. It's the thing that carries around all the food that it got out of your small intestine to every single cell of your body. It would be nice if the cells in my little toe could get up and go to the refrigerator and just get what they need when they're hungry, but they can't. They're stuck in my little toe. So it is literally the subway system. It is the pizza delivery system that carries pizza to every single cell in my body. Literally. And then it very kindly also picks up a lot of the trash, not all of it, 90% of the trash, that my cells throw out their front door and leave out on the curb. And that's what they do. Cells live in a interstitial, fluid-based flower bed, and when they're done with stuff, they're very rude, and they just litter it out in the street. Just throw it out there. And my cardiovascular system sucks up that stuff into veins, takes it back to the heart, gets cleaned up in various ways, and we start the process over again. But that's not all. Remember, we talked about the endocrine system. The endocrine system was your hormones, right? Hormones are chemical messengers, right? Well, the chemical messengers don't get to my little toe. They don't get to my pituitary gland. They don't get from my pituitary gland. They don't get from my glands into all the important parts of my body unless somebody takes them there. And that is the cardiovascular system. That is your circulatory system. So, no good in having an endocrine system if I can't get the chemical messengers where they need to go. No good having a digestive system if I can't get the food where it needs to go. No good having lungs if I can't get the oxygen where it needs to go and the carbon dioxide out of there. And the cardiovascular system brings the blood to your bones that keeps them alive, and they thank the cardiovascular system by staying alive and making more red blood cells and white blood cells to put in the cardiovascular system. Because all the systems are really one. They're starting to unite now. We see that one can't exist without the other. The skeletal system should just be the skeletal system. In a very simple world it would be, but my skeletal system should actually be part of my circulatory system. It makes all the red blood cells for my circulatory system. And my circulatory system keeps my skeletal system alive. And my circulatory system keeps all my glands alive, and my glands inject all their stuff into my circulatory system. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So this is the transport system for your body. And your heart is the center of it, pumping constantly for your entire life to transport these products to and from your cells. That's what it's doing. It's delivering pizza and bottled water and oxygen, and it's picking up trash and cell pee and poop and CO2 and carrying it back out of the body. That's what it does. That's the circulatory system. Truly amazing, and it never stops. And massage therapists care about this because we are in the circulatory system game. Not always, I admit, but a lot of the time, we are making clients better simply because we are increasing circulation. Oftentimes when we're stretching somebody, we're stretching them to increase space between their cells. Why do we want to create space between their cells? Blood gets in there. Oftentimes we're rubbing on a knot so that blood gets in there and loosens it back up again. If those calcium pumps in the blood contractile sarcomeres are stuck, which is debatable, but if they are, it's blood that we need to get in there. Blood's the thing that carries more calcium in there and gets the old calcium out, gets the potassium in there and all that stuff. Most of what we fix is about getting blood in there. The reason muscles repair so fast is they are blood rich. The reason tendons and ligaments repair so slowly is they're so darn dense the blood can't get in there. So it takes a long time for them to heal. Also makes them very strong, right? Because they're so dense, but they're so dense they can't get any blood in there. So we are in the blood game. We are in the circulatory game. We want to increase circulation. And there are essentially two ways to increase circulation. One is you can go exercise, and that is a great way. However, it does create wear and tear on your body. It does build up lactic acid. It produces other metabolic deposits in your body, which is fine, but it produces waste products in your body. And so if you've already worked out and now you're sore and things like that, going back to the gym is not really a viable option over and over and over again. Mr. Jones would tell you that he's probably already tried it. He found out he can't go to the gym 4 times a day. He actually doesn't get bigger faster. Doesn't work that way. But what Mr. Jones did find out is there's another way to increase the circulation that doesn't build up metabolic waste. He can get a massage. The squeezing and rubbing action of massage increases circulation usually about 4 times over normal resting. So somebody's repair rate during their massage is about 4 times, which is what's great about all this. So we are partnering with the circulatory system to bring life-giving blood to all areas of the body because blood is life. Yeah? Okay. That's the circulatory system. I do want to say something about the heart itself. The heart is a 4-chambered pump. It is a 4-chambered pump for a reason. It has 2 small chambers on top and 2 big chambers on the bottom. It's a highly efficient pump. There are other animals that have 2-chamber pumps and things like that. They're not as efficient. Or 1-chamber pumps. They're not as efficient. But we have a highly efficient pump. When your pump is this big and it's got to pump through hundreds of miles of tubing, it's got to be efficient. And so the 2 top pumps are what we call priming pumps. I don't know that your book calls it this. I don't care what your book calls it. I'm talking about real world how pumps work. And if you want a highly efficient pump, one of the things you want to make sure is the pump that you're really using to pump is fully loaded before you shoot it. I don't want to half fill up a bucket and carry it across someplace to put out a fire. I want to fully load a bucket to carry it someplace to go put out a fire, right? I want to be efficient. Priming pumps make sure the main pump is fully full. So these two little pumps on the top of the heart, their job is to pump blood into the lower, bigger pumps to make sure they are full before the lower, bigger pumps go whoosh. That's the way it works. And what really happens is, if we look at my body right now, we're going to make a giant heart on it right now. I've got a pump here, and two pumps down here, right? It's a 4-chambered heart. I know my heart is not this big. I'm trying to make a graphic display here. My right atrium is my top little cavity. It gets blood from all over my body, coming back. All these veins and stuff come back to my right atrium. Everything starts in the right atrium. Blood came up from my little toe and my big toe and my belly button and everything, and it dumps back in this right atrium. The right atrium squeezes and completely fills up the right ventricle. Completely fills it up, so that now I'm not going to waste the pump on the right ventricle, because that right ventricle's got to really do a good job now. The right ventricle pumps, and guess where that blood goes to? It goes to the lungs. And the lungs expel the CO2 that came from all over my body, and they pick back up oxygen-rich blood. And that oxygen-rich blood comes back to my left atrium, or atria. And it comes back up here. That left atria squeezes and fills up my left ventricle. My left ventricle is even larger than my right ventricle. This is why some people think your heart is found on the left side of your body. It is not. It is dead center, but it's a little bit bigger on the left side because the left ventricle is the most important pump. This left atria made sure that it was completely full. It pumped, filled it up completely full, because this left ventricle has a very big job to do right now. It is going to squeeze and pump that blood out through my entire body. When they are feeling for your pulse, it is because this left ventricle has pumped. By the way, both ventricles pump at the same time. That's a whole other story. It really pumps top 2 chambers, bottom 2 chambers, top 2 chambers, bottom 2 chambers. But anyway, the pulse you get when you feel somebody is because their left ventricle has gone whoosh. And you feel that pulse right there from the whoosh. For those of you that like horror movies and the person gets cut, that's an artery. That's the left ventricle pumping that blood out of the body. If you get cut, you want to get cut on a vein, because by the time the blood's coming back to the heart, it's not as under as much pressure. Going out from the heart, it's under a lot of pressure, right? And so that's how the heart works. It is a 4-chambered pump. It's got small chambers on top that help pump and prime the lower chambers to make sure they're completely full. The right atrium receives blood from the entire body, pumps it into the right ventricle pumps it to the lungs. Lungs exchange oxygen and CO2, come back to the left ventricle pumps, fills up the left atrium pumps, fills up the left ventricle pumps, fills up the entire body. Yes, Miss Correa.
So if the left ventricle doesn't get full to send it to the lungs, does that mean the body dies?
Yeah, so when people have problems with their heart valves, for example, because there are valves between these atrium and ventricles, and they're one-way valves. If they don't work quite right, those chambers don't fill up all the way, and you may not die, but what happens is your heart's not very efficient, so you're going to feel like you're out of breath, out of energy, all sorts of stuff, and you would have to have surgery on your valves or something. That's just a common kind of situation to kind of answer your question. If it completely doesn't function, you're a goner.
I asked because I had a nephew who didn't have a fully developed chamber, and he passed away a few days after he was born.
Yes.
So that's why.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like really interested in this part. So I wondered, just thinking about it.
No, you're apt. Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, if the chambers are truly not formed properly, and you're right, that does sometimes happen in newborns where there's a birth defect in the heart, and if they can't fix that, it's serious. You're right. As you sadly found out, I'm very sorry. Yeah. So here is a diagram of what I just told you. I think the diagram can be kind of confusing, but this is your right atrium. It is receiving blood from the entire body. Pretend like the entire body is down here. The entire body. Coming back from all over the body. Notice the veins get bigger and bigger. It dumps down in the top right atrium here. Right atrium goes through a one-way valve, fills up the right ventricle. Right ventricle pumps stuff out to the lungs. They get rid of CO2, pick up oxygen. Oxygen turns your blood red. It comes back to the right atrium. The left atrium here. It's because it's the client's left atrium. That pumps down to the left ventricle. This is the big one. Look how thick the muscle is around the left ventricle. It's got to pump a lot harder. And it pumps out, and it goes out to the rest of the body and feeds you back over again and starts the entire process over again. Yeah? Okay. Literally, that is the most important stuff to know about the cardiovascular system. Yeah, Mr. Ma, please.
Sir, can you tell me about the myocardial infarction?
Yes. Myocardial infarction, although I think somebody will tell us tomorrow about this, but myocardial infarction is it's a heart attack. And what it is it's usually caused by lack of blood to the heart. So when I had you guys doing this with your hand, we all know that our hand would stop being able to do this after a while, right? It would cramp up. So how does the heart keep doing this for 50 years or 100 years? It does it because the reason my hand cramps up, and the reason why when we're working out at the gym and we can't keep going after a while, is we run out of energy in those muscles and we build up lactic acid and deposits and we just have to stop. But if you increase the fuel supply to those muscles, they can essentially go on forever. So your heart has a tremendous blood supply to itself. It is bathed in blood. It's got tremendous amounts of blood coming to it to make sure it gets rid of its own waste and gets lots of nutrients to it all the time because it's never going to stop. This is the same concept as when you want to make a car go fast. If you want to make a car go fast, you dump more gasoline into it and more oxygen into it and have a bigger explosion. And you don't let it run out of gas. Well, your heart's the same way. Well, sir, Mr. Ma, the problem is if the arteries feeding my heart get clogged, the heart doesn't get the oxygen and nutrients it needs to keep beating, and parts of it die and it stops beating. So just if I stop feeding you, eventually it's that same kind of thing. And so every time somebody has a heart attack too, usually bits of their heart kind of die, and that's a problem too. But basically it's because the blood supply to the heart gets cut off. Not always, but a lot of times this is due to diet. So high cholesterol diets tend to clog arteries in the heart. And they can be clogged a little bit, but when they get clogged too much, then the heart all of a sudden doesn't get enough nutrients and it stops working. And what they will often do is, if they can save somebody, which often they can't, but if they can, they'll actually sometimes go in there and sew in new arteries, like new tubing, to make sure that heart's getting the blood it needs. Yeah.
Yeah, my father's older brother and his wife, they both died because of this disease. In a very short time, maybe a few minutes, they passed away.
Yeah.
And my dad last year he got the same disease, but we have a family take care of him. So they live together. So my dad is fine. He just did a surgery for the is that called implant or something? Put into the arm.
Put into your arm?
Yeah, is that called heart stent?
Oh, a stent. But they didn't put it in his arm. They put it in his heart.
Well,
So a stent is like a little spring, everybody, that actually widens and keeps the artery open. Because one of the problems when arteries get closed is they tend to weaken in certain areas, they kind of collapse, and the stent usually opens up the tubing and keeps it open to the heart. So I wouldn't think it'd be in his arm, though. I think it'd be in his heart.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Because I
they might have stolen arteries from his arm to put in his heart. They sometimes will steal tubing from other parts of your body, because you tend to have extra tubing in areas, and they can steal some from your leg is where they usually steal them from, but I'm sure they could steal them from your arm. And they might have sewn those in there too. I will say this is a fact-based comment, even though it is an opinion too, but it's a fact. Side. One of the problems is if you're having heart attacks because of cholesterol buildup, if you don't change your diet, they have to keep putting in stents. They have to keep fixing the problem. Like, you want to fix the problem, which is the stuff building up in the tubing in your heart. Yeah. Ms. Hendrickson.
Yeah, my grandfather had like 4 bypass surgeries. He was like a really tough guy. Somehow survived all of it. But one time when he was recovering in the hospital, he signed up to be like do not resuscitate, and he took off his like oxygen mask and he just started going like gray.
Yeah.
So the nurse like put it back on, and then I think they had to go in and put like more stents in. So amazingly, he had like 3 or 4 of them. But I was actually going to ask about is a stroke basically the same thing but in the brain, or is that totally different? Oh, I forgot.
Well,
is it like electrical storm, or is that
no. Oh, I can see why you're saying it's the same thing. A stroke is a lack of blood supply to some place in the brain, usually from a ruptured blood vessel, so now blood's not getting to an area in the brain. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, in the sense, you're right. They're both caused by a lack of blood flow. A lack of blood flow to your heart means though your heart stops beating. A lack of blood flow to your brain means your brain stops functioning. Sometimes you're still alive when your brain stops functioning, right? Because it's just a portion, but you act very strange.
Right.
So they cause very different problems. They could both, by the way, be extremely life-threatening, but I guess the heart attack's probably more immediately life-threatening. But I mean, strokes too, depending on how bad the brain damage can be life-threatening too. They definitely are horribly life-disrupting. Yeah, horrible. Yeah. And by the way, heart attacks are something that are very much an American epidemic because of our diet. So there are places in the world where they're very uncommon. And we know it's not genetic because when people come from those places in the world where they're doing fine and they come to our country and start eating our food, they seem to have a hard time with it. So, Miss Clayton.
What about the electrical impulses and how they impact the heart? I mean, isn't it basically something to do with electrical impulses or what keep it going?
Yes. So that's another problem you can have in your heart, which is the electrical impulses that tell it to beat. And how fast to beat, right? Just like our nervous system sends signals to tell things to beat. Now, your heart can essentially beat on its own, but it's still done through electrical impulses. But it does no good to send something an electrical impulse if it's not getting blood. So that is a different type of problem when they put in like a pacemaker on somebody and they make sure if their heart's going too slow that it kind of gives an extra electrical impulse, so it goes too fast and slows it down. That's a pacemaker, and it's essentially an artificial nervous system. But heart attacks are usually caused by a blood flow problem. Both are really big problems, right? But they're from different situations.
Got it. Thanks.
One is about signals, the electrical stuff, and the other one's about power and juice from the ability to have oxygen and food go into that muscle. Very cool. All right. So that gives us a good overview of the heart. I have released your one quiz for tonight. I want to show you your assignments on the heart. I will talk about the heart more tomorrow too. I don't want you to feel like that's all you're going to hear about the heart. Let me show you this though too. Bear with me. So again, extremely briefly, you can do 10 sentences. I said no more, definitely. You can do less. keep these really short. But we want to know about some common problems of the heart. So, Ms. Young, are you there, Ms. Young, by the way?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm here.
Ms. Young, you have anemia.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Thornton, you have angina pectoris. Interesting. Ms. Stevens, arterial sclerosis. I always feel drunk when I say it. Mr. Snell, congestive heart failure. Mr. Singletary, coronary artery disease. Ms. Savarino, this is a big one, Ms. Savarino. Keep it to 10 sentences, but it's an important one. Deep vein thrombosis. Some people call it DVT. And we do care about it. This can affect our clients. I mean, all this can affect our clients. But this could be something in a massage that could affect them. Mr. Richards, hypertension. Ms. Rader, myocardial infarction. Ms. Pugh, peripheral arterial disease. Mr. Overman, phlebitis. Ms. Osuna, Raynaud syndrome. Mr. Manzanares, varicose veins. Mr. Manzanares, also tell us if we can massage varicose veins or not. Because that one comes up a lot. Can we massage varicose veins or not, Mr. Manzanares? But don't tell us till tomorrow. Mr. Ma, tell us about anemia. 10 sentences or less, sir. Or less. Mr. Lee, angina pectoris. Miss Lee, atherosclerosis. I don't know why it's so hard for me. Mr. Joe, Miss Hendrickson, I bet I know what you're going to ask, but go ahead and ask.
Didn't you give Mr. Thornton angina pectoris?
I did. I gave these all to everybody twice.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did it on purpose because the key to teaching is repetition, repetition, repetition. Because the key to teaching is repetition, repetition, repetition. Because the key to teaching is repetition, repetition, repetition. So yeah, I thought hearing it twice from two different points of view, it really wasn't a cop-out. It really wasn't intentional. But you're absolutely right. So you have heard these before. Deja vu. Mr. Jones, congestive heart failure. Ms. Hendrickson, coronary artery disease. Miss Green, deep vein thrombosis, just like Miss Savarino. Mr. Singletary, yes, you have your hand up.
My biology instructor in high school said it's atherosclerosis.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong, but that's how he told me to say it.
Atherosclerosis. I've never heard it said that way. That, by the way, I don't mean that arrogantly. Let's try something here. Hold on, sir.
Arteriosclerosis.
Arterial sclerosis. Darn it, I have already done.
Arteriosclerosis.
Arterial sclerosis. I can't do it. So they're saying it with a T instead of a TH, sir. Anyway, which doesn't make your teacher wrong, by the way. Maybe there's 7 ways to say it. Mr. Godot, hypertension. Miss Everson, myocardial infarction. Mr. Bose, peripheral arterial disease. Ms. Dimitrick, phlebitis. Ms. Deng, Raynaud syndrome. Mr. Craven, varicose veins. And once again, can we massage them? We'll see. All right, so I have 3 people left with this little thing. Miss Abelos, Miss Carrillo, and Miss Clayton. This is just the way the alphabet worked when I was doing this, by the way. I said review a system of the body. You can pick your system, because I thought we've done them so many times. Maybe you want to pick a system that you want, 10 sentences or less, that you want to cover. I'm also okay if you pick some exciting thing in 10 sentences or less about the cardiovascular system that you want to cover. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can have some latitude in this. You guys do excellent presentations. I don't see a problem with that. But I also thought you might want some guidance. So if you want some guidance, pick your favorite system and talk to us about it. Talk to us about why it's your favorite system. Something like that. So that's Miss Avalos, Miss Carrillo, and Miss Clayton. Cool. All right. I think that's it. All right, we got 7 minutes left. Take a look at your quiz. And I'm sorry for all the work right now. This will not be on